Right. Okay, so happy Friday again, everyone. Um, we are here for yet another community demo. We got some great content from Andy today.
Oh yeah.
I don't know that we saw anything else that was submitted, but obviously we have Release 4.0 coming up. We talk a little bit about that in terms of finalizing timelines there. Open it up to the rest of the community on the call for any questions, and then wrap from there. Sound good? Sound good?
Good.
Great. So, Andy.
Oh, cool. Oh, I just unplugged everything. You might have to share.
Yeah, I got you. You got it.
You're good at this.
One thing I do know around here is teleconference.
All right. Can y'all see my screen?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I just want to start here with the milestones. So Revant and I have been working on this performance optimization milestone, specifically with the PWA application. So we went off for a few weeks now, I guess, on some research tasks, and now, well, you can see we created, 50 tickets, and now we're coming back through and actually, tackling these issues and opening up PRs and stuff. I started with I have quite a few things to go through, so I might go a little bit quickly, but we started with like the low-hanging fruit, so this should be, low effort, kind of high reward type stuff. So I'll pause for questions after each one, but these first few should be pretty simple. The first one, we're retrying Apollo operations now, so Apollo has this concept of a link, and you can kind of think of it like middleware, where you're going to insert a bunch of links into the chain before we actually send a GraphQL request. And so one of the things they provide is a retry link. And so, PWAs are going to be in low bandwidth, low connectivity, that's kind of their niche. So, we might not have a network. And so this gives us retry logic for making GraphQL calls specifically. So there's not much to demo here. I'll kind of go through this. So I basically just, I can make this bigger, I guess, was like, hey, let's go to an endpoint that doesn't actually exist. This just simulates like a network error. And so before this change, when you first initially load the application, we go get we make 3 GraphQL calls. One's for the store configuration, one's for the navigation menu, and I'm blanking on the third one. But anyway, there's 3 requests that get kicked off right away. And so that was before this PR. And if the GraphQL endpoint was unreachable at that point, they would all just fail and you'd be sunk. But after this PR, you can kind of see there's now 15 requests. So each request will get retried 5 times. That's just the default we went with. And you can kind of see this waterfall of when they get retried. So there's exponential delay and jittering of these things, so that when your server does come back online, it doesn't get slammed with a whole bunch of requests all at once. So that's the retrying Apollo operations. Are there any questions on that guy? So the code was pretty easy on this one. It's literally just adding the link, their retry link that they support and supply. That's tests. And we just put it into our chain of links and send that to the venue. So, okay, cool. No questions. Moving on. The lazy loading search bar. So we had, so part of my investigation was the React rendering, the performance of the application itself. And so you don't really need to know a whole lot about these flame charts, but I noticed on initial load, so we have this initial load flame chart that's does a whole bunch of stuff the very first time. And then right after that, there was an update, which went and got this search bar and rendered that. I was like, that's interesting. So, and then you can actually see it again. I don't know if you can see my mouse or anything, but I can kind of zoom in on it. the search bar gets rendered every single time the route changes. And that's because it sits in the header. And there's a very simple, kind of easy mix-up mistake that happened here. So we are conditionally, this is the code before the PR, so we're conditionally setting the fallback on suspense. So the search bar component is split off into its own Webpack chunk and is lazy loaded. It's not included in the initial client bundle. But since it's being used on initial load, that's not really that great. You do want it included if you need it right away. And so the code here was conditionally rendering the fallback, which we don't actually want. We want to, based if the search is open or not, conditionally render the entire thing. And so basically, long and short of this one is the search bar is still off in its own Webpack chunk, and we don't pull that in until someone actually clicks to open the search. So if they never click to open the search, we never download that chunk, and there's some savings there. So just a quick fix on that one. Let's see. Route-based code splitting. Okay, so similar theme on this one in terms of Webpack chunking. So I guess the code might be easier to see this one. So we used to statically import the create account page and the search root component. Again, these were included in the client.js bundle. But you can imagine, like, if the user never goes to the create account page or never goes to the search page, there's really no reason to include those in the initial bundle. So this splits these two out. This is our render routes file, which may or may not be familiar to you. But basically, here's where we put in the client-side routes. Search HTML, create account, and those are lazy loaded in. So that we won't download the create account page or the search page until the user actually goes to those things. So let's see. I think that's all I wanted to say about that. In the PR, you can see that this create account page is now in its own chunk, and where it used to be inside client.js. So we end up seeing savings on the size of client.js. So it used to include the search and create account chunks, 101 KB, and now it's down to 93. So yeah, okay, so that's it for this one. Any questions on the route-based code splitting? I had the kind of best practices here from the React docs. The idea being basically like users on the web are used to, when they go to a new page, it taking some time or whatever. So it's not a huge deal to go and fetch that chunk, and because we're re-rendering the whole page anyway. So all right. Then Jordan's on the call. I took over a couple pull requests from him as he gets closer to his own launch. So this one is a bug fix for the heuristic fragment matcher. So this is if you've gone in development mode to like a simple product, I guess is the easiest way to see this. So go to like accessories and then a pair of earrings or something, and you can see in the console Apollo spits out a big ugly warning that says you have heuristic fragment matching going on, but you're joining I think it was like a union type or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but anyway, instead they also export this fragment matcher, I think it's called. I should know these things, but I can't remember now.
Shame.
Introspection fragment matcher. Which basically, because our backend has these union and interface types, we need to use this other matcher instead. So it's not too bad, but I did want to highlight BuildPack now has some utilities around making GraphQL calls. So at build time, we're going to go issue an introspection request to the GraphQL schema and figure out what are all the types, what are all the union and interface types that we have. Then this is Webpack. So go get all those union and interface types, and then we're using the Webpack define plugin to send that, basically include that, inject that into the Webpack bundle so that the Venia storefront, the UI, can use that later. So here's where we go and get it, inject it using the define plugin, and then later from the app itself, here's Venia adapter. We can this entire union and interface, all caps. I hesitate to call it a variable, but that will be completely replaced by Webpack with this big long string that looks like, I think I put it in a mock somewhere. I can't find it now. But anyway, that'll be a big, huge long string in your final bundle. But basically what it needs to know, this introspective fragment manager needs to know about the union and interface types. And so this is how we tell it. Yeah, I think that's it. I wanted to highlight, that the build pack now has some utilities around making GraphQL calls, and you can have GraphQL files here. So we were inlining these queries and things as strings before. We can now separate those out. It's just a little bit cleaner to work inside build pack now. So
it's extremely good.
Oh, thank you. So that is the heuristic fragment matcher. Now, if you go to a simple product, a pair of earrings or something, there's no more warning. So the payoff on that one. Okay, this one is showing so this is categories that don't have any products in them. And previously, if you created one of these things and you went and visited that category in the UI, you would just get like an empty shell, basically. And now, with these changes, there's a nice little message that says, hey, there's no products in this category. Why don't you try one of these other categories instead? And this list is populated from the categories that we've already retrieved from GraphQL anyway. It does randomize this list, and it does not include the category that we know is empty. So we won't give you a link right back to the empty category that you're sitting in. So that's pretty much it for that one. Yeah, I was gonna.
There's a story to that.
This is my pièce de résistance, which is at the end. I've kind of gone quickly through these first ones, but this last one's pretty cool, and I'm excited about it. And the pièce de résistance has just made me think of the piece of resistance from the Lego movie, so that's why that's here. That's the American version, I think. I'm pretty sure. Don't quote me on that.
Yes, John.
Pretty sure that's what that means. Yeah. The PR I just put up yesterday, a couple days ago maybe, upgrading the Apollo view layer. We are now moving to the Apollo hooks, use query, use lazy query, use mutation, stuff like that. So I guess the easiest thing is to kind of go down this list. So this PR is big. There's 41 files changed. Most of that, so it removes actually the Peregrine use query hook and use query result that kind of went along with it. We've simplified a lot of, Apollo wasn't doing hooks exactly correctly, or using context, exactly correctly. So we ended up having two different Apollo providers. We can now get rid of one of those, which is cool. So there's 41 files changed, but it's a whole lot of removing code, which is pretty awesome, especially from a maintenance standpoint. So React Apollo used to be the thing that we used. That gave us like some higher order components like query and other. I can't remember the other ones that we were using, but you've seen these throughout the code base. You would wrap some rendering code in a query, and then it would give you back error, loading, and data response, and then you could use those things to actually render your what you actually wanted to render. And now it's just using hooks instead. So we can drop React Apollo, which was the previous view layer. We're now using add Apollo React-hooks. This ends up being half the size of React Apollo, so it's a nice little bundle savings there. Like I said, we replace instances of this query component with use query hooks. We removed Peregrine's use query. That was like our own, before they got their stuff together. That sounds bad, but like before they were ready, we ended up rolling our own use query hook. So we just replaced that with, we removed the Peregrine one, and we're now using the Apollo one directly. Use lazy query is interesting. I should probably highlight that. A lot of times in your functional component, if you're just saying use query, that query will be fired off right away. And sometimes you don't want that. You want a query to fire off in response to some user action. They clicked a button or they entered some text in a field or something. So that's where use lazy query comes in. It's basically you can defer the first call of your query until something else happens. So you can see examples of this in the code. In this PR, it's still open right now, open to feedback for sure, number 1827. And then, yeah, it removes a couple other things that I mentioned previously that we needed a couple different Apollo providers for. So now we've kind of consolidated that into just one, which is nice. Yeah, and this changes all of the way we make GraphQL calls and render the UI. So this will get a lot of tests. This will be you can also see up here a major version since we removed some public API from Peregrine. So 4.0, I think we mentioned previously, is coming up. I think that's next week. So this will not be in 4.0, but 5.0 will have a lot of stuff in it, which will be cool. And I think should be a pretty fast follow to 4.0 if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say about this one. Does anyone have, this one's kind of the biggest one. Does anyone have comments or questions or anything about this guy?
Questions.
I mean, I guess I want to. You did a really good job, I think, of filling in all the context, which is normally what I want to do. So I'm not going to go on at length, but I'm just going to do my usual. I'm just going to do my usual. Like, this is really good, really important work, and this stuff like unlocks a lot of potential optimizations that were sort of hard to trace in the code before. So
yes,
each and every ticket that is labeled performance right now is worth a second look if you've looked at it and been not sure how to proceed. Once we start using the regular Apollo provided hooks for use query, etc., it is going to be a lot easier to introduce performance improvements. And so it's definitely worth a revisit there. That's all I got. Thank you for doing all this stuff. It's amazing.
Yeah, thanks for calling that out too. So yeah, this one specifically, 1827 upgrading to hooks does unblock a lot of other issues. So yeah, thanks for calling that out.
Sure.
That's it for me.
Very good. Great job, Andy.
Thanks.
So we didn't have anything else on the agenda in terms of from our side for demos, but open it up to anybody on the line that might have something to share, something to demo, something to talk about with any work that you have going on in particular. Feel free to plug yourself if you want to plug yourself, build your brand. I don't know.
Smash like and subscribe.
That's at the end, man. Whoa, don't jump the gun. Yeah. Anybody? Anything from you?
Actually, yeah, I got a question if it's worth proceeding. So right now, when we switch to either a product page or a category page, you have this loader. But since we use the HTML Webpack plugin, can we just make a separate HTML file for the category and the product page for the initial load so we can show a skeleton, or doesn't that make sense?
You were looking into some of that too,
I didn't get the question.
That does make a lot of sense. I think the trouble for us is that the second HTML page would be something we would never know to load if you were entering the application on a product page. So once you start creating multiple pages, the danger is that you'll end up reloading the same code over and over again. as you navigate around. So I'm not opposed to it in principle, but the overall architecture of the application is to start from a single HTML page and then branch once we've detected the URL. So I think there's other ways to do a skeleton, but if you have a PR that like shows that this isn't a concern and that we can still have a really efficient experience without, too much fetching with multiple HTML pages, we're open to it. We would just need
Cool.
to see the demo, I think. Yeah.
Sure. All right. I'll dive into it.
Cool.
All right, who else? Anybody else? And anything from Jimmy or James on the line?
Nothing for me. I will echo the comments again that Zetlin said. Switching to Apollo's hooks is the right move at this point. It will resolve a few bugs that we had with our original hooks, right? Like not reflecting loading correctly. But more importantly, it'll open up new optimizations. And it's really a very small change set from the user's perspective. We're basically using them the same way.
All right. So quickly, I think just for other updates we have, as Andy talked about, and we've talked about before, we have the PWA Studio 4.0.0 release coming up. We're targeting next week, sometime between the 7th and 8th to release, but of course we'll make sure we're pushing out more communication as that's coming up. Again, I think we pointed to the release notes and what's contained within the release previously, so check out the backlog. If you have questions, feel free to ask in the community Slack. We have MLEU coming up here in a couple weeks. A lot of great content planned for that from a PWA perspective with James and Eric. We also have a couple, or at least for one lab session for sure planned, where we're walking through getting started with PWA Studio, customized PWA Studio, creating components and using Peregrine and Talents. So look forward to that if you're going to be out at MLEU here in the next couple weeks. And lastly, we made an announcement about this in the community Slack, but I think we should take time for a quick golf clap for Jordan, who has been announced as our first community maintainer for PWA Studio. Right. All he really gets out of this is the crappy T-shirt, nothing else. But, we'll get that T-shirt to you sooner or later, Jordan.
Awesome.
No, so Jordan has been doing a great job already. I think with basically fulfilling the role of a community maintainer without the official acknowledgement of being a community maintainer. So long time coming probably for that. And so yeah, there we go. I think that's it for updates. Quick pause for anything from anyone around the room on the call. Ron in the corner. Nothing.
Oh, nothing. Maybe next week.
Great.
You got some good stuff.
All right. Well, hey, thanks everyone. Smash like and subscribe.
Yep.
Recording has ended. Onwards and upwards.
Thank you, guys.
See you guys
Thanks.
later.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye.